03. Let's start. So yes, so as it just got mentioned, so we're going to be recording this session. So be aware of that. So welcome to our Emerging Technology Committee of Interest August monthly meeting. I'm Frédéric Deveau. I'm the new industry chair for the COI, and so I'm welcoming you to this meeting. So do you mind going to the next slide? Okay. So today we're gonna go through our usual elements. So we're gonna start with a little overview of what the emerging technology COI is. Then to actually do the program talk with the DevSecOps talk, and then quick updates on the working groups. Oh yes, and then the ACT-IAC at large working group. So yeah, so first I would like to thank Todd. I don't know if he's in the audience right now, but Todd Hager, right? That was our fearless leader for the past 7-8 years. Has passed down the torch. I'm honored to be the one receiving it for now, and hopefully, Todd, you'll stay with us to advise me and us into how to keep this great COI going the way that it has been under your leadership. So, thanks for that first. So, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So very quickly, so the mission statement, right, for our COI is to provide a collaborative, energetic consortium that encompasses many different stream of and domain of expertise to look into how emerging technologies can help and benefit the advancement of the government and leadership and education. So we have a few current objectives, which is to expand the cognitive computing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, quantum technologies, to develop and broaden our understanding of its usage within the government, to develop awareness of technologies like blockchain, again, AI, IoT within the government, to better understand how like analytics, big data can be leveraged to improve the business of government. Is everything good? Okay.
Looking good.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And so here we have here's the what we currently have for the for our roster in terms of the COI and the various working groups. So we have I'm not gonna go through all of them, but we have currently a vacant position for government vice chair. So if you know anybody who would be interested, let us know. Yeah. Also, I would like to welcome Tim as the new industry vice chair for this year. Any other vacant position right now? No. Okay. Do you mind going to the next slide? Okay, and so for the updates, Rob, did you want to take over on this one?
Sure, thanks, Fred. So sorry about the hiccup with the quick hiccup there with the screen sharing. I've had a couple internet issues. So I'm Robert Werman. I work at GSA in the Office of Government-Wide Policy. and I am the government chair for the Emerging Technology COI. So Fred's giving you a quick overview of the scope of our community with blockchain and quantum and artificial intelligence and IoT and smart cities, and so forth. So wanted to also just give you a quick update on some things that are happening across ACT-IAC. We're going to share this deck and with the attendees here, as well as post it on our site. But registration is currently open for late October with Imagination ELC. That's the big conference in Hershey that brings together the entire community. Multiple hundreds of people will come to that. It's a really great multi-day event. If you're able to, please do try to get there, and let's all say hello to each other as a COI. And then as well, there's a number of other events that will be going on over the next year. Leading up to next May, there'll be an Emerging Technology and Innovation Conference in Cambridge, Maryland. So that being said, so we have all of these different working groups. We have these monthly meetings. There's a lot of great work that comes out of this, and I'd like to invite everybody here that has any type of an interest, whether you see yourself as an expert or you're just taking an interest now in these types of technologies. We try to create a welcoming environment for people of all levels alike. And one of the great things that comes out of these working groups is deliverables, and those may be white papers like we're going to talk about today. They may be events, like we see some of the working groups will hold events and publish podcasts and have speaker series. So this slide just shows you some of the things that have happened just in the last couple of months since early June. Aside from the DevSecOps paper that we're going to talk about today, there was also a quantum primer that was published. It actually had a podcast where Dave Wintergreen, along with Tim Gilday and Jeremy Wood and Sabina Sokol, spoke with Jason Miller of Federal News Radio about it. So that was some really great work. Pete Saronis, who runs the IoT and Smart Cities working group, had a podcast recently as well. We've had the AI working group has been very active in responding to RFI from White House OSTP on national AI priorities, as well as one from NTIA. In late July, we had a pause for equity in the emerging technology arena, where we had Arlinda Halliburton, Amora Upton, and Jackie French spoke at each of the working group meetings about some recent work that they did around emerging technology literacy, as well as CSCRIM. And so I'm not going to go through all these, but as you can see, there's any one of a number of different types of events that we have as well with the speaker series. We've had people from a number of different agencies, just even in the past 2.5 months, speaking on AI and quantum. So if you have any interest in this and joining us, please do. Again, we want to create that welcoming environment. It's not just a place to do this work. It's also a place to get to know each other and connect with people that have a similar interest. So that being said, don't want to hold up the show too much longer. I'm going to hand over the podium to our distinguished panelists. First of all, leading with David Hernandez, who will guide you through the rest of our meeting. So thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for joining.
No worries, and thank you so much, Rob. I'm gonna have to apologize for the purpose of this call because I'm gonna have to apologize for the purpose of this call because of the fact that I just had to switch out my computer yesterday, and now I've got the camera shooting from this awkward angle, so it's my first time using it. But in any case, wanted to give a special thanks to my panelists and just for this presentation. I've got 3 esteemed members of government with us today. We have Jerry Hagedorn, who is, he's basically chief of all IT operations within USDA FPAC, is also currently the acting CTO. Casey Cook, who is chief of the cloud architecture within the USDA headquarters, and Melissa Rummel, who is, actually, Melissa, remind me your exact title one more time. I apologize, I did not have it in front of me.
No worries. Transformation Delivery Director.
And so we're here today kind of for a couple purposes, right? Ultimately, what brought us together was the fact that Jerry and myself, along with an esteemed group who I will give acknowledgement to at the end of this presentation, helped put together a white paper recently around organizational impediments to DevOps, right? Some of the different things that keep getting in the way when organizations are trying to execute and drive forward. And rather than just kind of present forward all the ideas in the paper, we thought let's speak to some of the folks that were part of that inspiration and who are actually dealing with these problems today, get some of their insights, get some understanding, and use that to drive a good conversation around where we're at, where we're trying to go, and what that future could look like. So before we start, Melissa, Casey, I'm going to surprise you guys with something. I have a fun little question for you guys, and see if you guys actually, what everybody's thoughts on the answer is. But what is the most used language in programming? You guys have any thoughts?
COBOL.
Casey, what were we saying?
I guess the same as Melissa, COBOL, because nobody can get rid of it.
Jerry?
Yeah, if we're talking about holistic lines of code, then yeah, that's probably what it is today still.
Well, sadly, everybody here is wrong. It's actually profanity. So thought I would have a little bit of fun with everybody today, just kind of, speaking of the frustrations that we have to deal with in our environment. And so again, the paper itself, the idea here was everybody's pushing DevOps. There's so many different things. It's evolving constantly. Now we got MLOps, we've got data ops, we've got DevSecOps, SecDevOps, we've got FinOps, we've got kind of all sorts of different ops. And we get down to this kind of general conversation around what does this mean? Where do we start? Like, what's this supposed to be? And depending on who you ask and what the conversation looks like, it's always different. So I was hoping for the purpose of our conversation today, we can kind of kick this off with each one of you maybe giving me where for yourselves, kind of what exactly, how are you defining DevOps, at least either from your perspective or from your organization's perspective when you have that conversation. So Jerry, I don't know if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, sure. And so I'm going to talk about this from my IT ops hat, and that's really when we started this paper and worked through that. That's been my drive, and it's really, from my perspective, it's about the culture and the mindset change, right? So moving from a concept of silos to starting to break down those silos. How do we build collaboration across those? But how do you do it in a manner such that we're ensuring that we're meeting our compliance requirements, like separations and concerns and all of those things. One of the key things that I'll talk about, and Casey and I, among probably a number of other folks on this call, live a lot of this from a cloud working group, and that's how do you get a very large organization such as USDA with a bunch of different mission areas, and how do you start to move that forward, right? And how do you drive unity without necessarily having to have uniformity? Because with all of the diverse missions in USDA, trying to do anything one way just doesn't work. But if you have everybody going off in different directions, it also doesn't work, right? So it's a lot of that complexity about how do you break down those silos, how do you get an organization the size of FPAC and USDA to start to move with some unity as you go forward with that. So that's a few key things I would point out.
Yeah. No, I could very much agree with that one in a lot of ways. I think that the silos in and of themselves is always kind of one of those inherent challenges, and I think it's a topic we want to dive into a little bit later. But Melissa, I'll let you go next.
Sure. So I would, I guess, give a +1 to the culture piece, and at least for USPTO, we've really approached it from a product perspective. So on a product transformation, and really to drive that product thinking, you also need DevSecOps and you need Agile. But at the end of the day, I think it's all about having those product teams, and I think to Jerry's point, breaking down those silos and really making sure that you have the skills on the team, to own that product or that piece of value end to end. And I really liked what Jerry was saying about, it's really not a one size fits all, right? Like, it's not necessarily about the framework, but it's about the outcome that you're trying to achieve, and really thinking about where you are, where you want to go, and then fitting that and thinking about the ways you're working to achieve that value at the end of the day.
Yep. And it's something that I think inherently is different to each organization, right? I don't think there's one right decision. I think in many cases, while we do have these definitions of DevOps, when we're talking about it from a technical perspective, certain stacks that are common, ultimately, it's really about a philosophy. It's a way of work. It's sort of a culture that you're bringing to the table. I'm going to bring this up a few times during our conversation, but it's kind of inherent to the concept, which is when you're trying to drive these changes, how do we make sure people kind of, when we're trying to change this way of work, how do we get them to understand it? So just want to showcase real quickly, this is actually one of the slides from our paper, one of the images, and it kind of speaks to some of the topics we're talking about. But Casey, did you want to add anything in before we move on?
No, I really, triples are safe, triples are best, right? Culture is really one of the key things there, is really focusing the business goals along with IT. For USDA side, it's really getting that business product ownership, helping drive the innovation and the IT focus together. And I know that's something Jerry and I deal with a lot, and it's good to hear Melissa seeing the same thing on the USPTO side.
Yep. So one other thing I want to get to then, I think, and this might be a good starting point. Each one of our agencies, and depending on who you ask and when you ask and how you ask, will say they've been doing DevOps for any X number of years. And it's part of who we are, et cetera. But, I think I'd like to get each one of your takes on, kind of where did you actually start? Like what kicked you guys off? What drove that initial inspiration to get the process started? I like to have fun with a few of these because I was just going through a couple images today, and I feel like, when you talk to people, they're like, oh, we were all doing it, but how'd you guys get that process going?
Who's starting? I can start if that's okay. Sure. Okay. So I think where we started, I think what you said is very true. So we, USPTO, I think it could be argued that, we started Agile and DevSecOps, maybe back in 2013, 2014. But from my perspective, we did have a burning platform where we had a system outage that had an impact, and USPTO is a fee-funded agency. And so that major critical system going down impacted our ability to collect fees. And so leveraging that kind of burning platform or sense of urgency for change, we did start on this project to product transformation and looking at, and it was even more broad than that, but holistically modernizing our systems, stabilizing, and then looking at the ways that we worked. And again, with, I think one of the key things, and I think Casey was kind of honed in on this, it's always focused on the why. So why we're changing. So we had a why, and we were able to leverage that to get the entire organization to also change. So we had, leadership, engagement and buy-in, and did our entire IT program actually changed the way we work. So not just the teams that were focused in on DevOps, but also the teams that support. So our entire IT program is doing new ways of working and thinking about having those teams, those product teams, and bringing our business partners closer into the work. So making sure that our business is engaged at every level to help drive those prioritizations and continue to focus on the value.
Yeah. And Melissa, you made an interesting point with regards to kind of the fact of a little bit of how USPTO is driven, right? There's the fee funded aspect of it, which is it always gives a good incentive to the idea of, we need to move forward because we can't afford to allow these costs to continue. USDA, however, while at the enterprise level does leverage a very heavy shared service model, operates primarily off of appropriations. So, maybe Casey, if you want to kick off, but between you and Jerry, you know, how's it different for you guys in terms of trying to drive that incentive to move forward and to push that transformation?
Sure. Yeah. So in OCIO, we are fee driven, just like USPTO. I know Melissa and I've talked before. That's something we share, but the way we're federated, my customer is like Jerry in this scenario, right? And the business side. So they're directly funded in a different model. So that's really where we want to find the ways we can enterprise-wide support services and capabilities in an effective manner and reduce toil, and like trying to get towards I believe Jerry calls it the self-service model. I think I phrased that right for you, Jerry. And that's really that's some of the places we've started working, is reducing that toil and enabling a consistent and achievable delivery model to enable like Jerry's group to focus on the parts they need. And that helps us move faster and more effectively. I know there's a question separate that we'll address later in the chat about acquisition.
And we'll get to that one, but I think, you know, you speak to a good example too, though, because I mean, you're speaking to, you know, being fast, but a core element of DevOps isn't just fast, it's speed to value, right? So ultimately, you know, we want to be careful that, and this is actually, you know, kind of speaking of those little memes I was looking through, I found the funny one where these guys were digging a hole through a mine and they're like, we're progressing so fast, we're going so quick, and then they hit, you know, a small leak of water, and then it zooms out and they realize they were going so fast that they weren't clearing the dirt out behind them, and now they're locked up inside this cave with the water picking up. So, you know, it's like, it's a balance, right? How do you kind of go fast but make sure you're doing so in a manner that's ultimately, you know, not, you know, holistically helping the organization achieve value, not just, you know, here's a bunch of features that we just dropped off, right? So Jerry, you want to jump in there and kind of add on to the conversation?
Yeah, and so one of the things that we've been trying to work through from an FPAC and USDA perspective, right, is how do you gain that acceleration and breaking down those silos without necessarily, in the end up doubling the work, right? And so if every team works in isolation, then you've just sort of changed your silos from one direction to another direction, and you don't end up getting that reuse. And so that was actually one of the things we've been trying to work through is, hey, you know, platform teams can be divided up, and you can have teams that focus and providing that self-service, as Casey was talking about. Actually, Dave, if we can go to that the other slide that was in the paper, I think that
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that would be good. You know, making sure first that you know, from a platform team perspective, that their key client, like Casey, like I am Casey's client, that platform team is providing services to those you know, stream aligned teams, the delivery teams that are doing those work. But you know, do we all need to do cloud automation separately? And so that's one of the things we've been trying to collapse is, hey, all of our Terraform and IAC automation, bringing that together and sharing that across FPAC. And now through the CWG and COP, we're starting to have discussions about how do we start to share that across USDA and start to leverage that at scale, right? And so, so that's that, you know, that concept that we're trying to work through, and all this came out of you know, the Team Topologies book with Payas and Skelton and some of the concepts, taking those concepts and figuring out how do we adapt those to a government model, because you know, in this case also the platform team and sort of treating that as a product also then allowed us to have that separation of concerns. So you've got a separate operations team from the development team. They're still tightly coupled from the standpoint of that team on the front is directly providing self-service capabilities to that. I think the other thing that caught me, you know, is one of the aha moments, you know, particularly in organizations, we're always talking about how communication is so important. And one of the things that Team Topologies talked about is, yes, communication is important, but too much communication and not the focused communication can be very detrimental, right? And when you have a collaboration model where all you're doing is all of this communication, it slows down your velocity and your ability to deliver on, right? You know, on what you're trying to deliver from a product perspective. And so that balancing act of sort of how do you divide up the work, and how do you make sure that those teams are aligned so that you have the right communications between the right people, and make sure that that communications that is happening and is important is very focused and on target. So.
Yeah, and it's ultimately, I mean, I think it's a matter of, you know, there's so many of these ideas, there's so many of these concepts that are being layered one on top of the other. It can get to a point where, you know, you're almost over engineering when incorporating DevOps as well. And I think that to take a step back from that, though, one of the topics that we talked about in the paper was the concept of cognitive load. The challenges of trying to drive all of these changes, because part of where DevOps started to make so much more sense is as development started to shift more heavily to the cloud, right? And kind of, you know, trying to operate in these new environments where we were realizing that the old ways we were developing don't really fit so much anymore. So I kind of, you know, I think the analogy I've been using lately has been sort of like a horse and buggy versus a car, right? Both are going to drive you down the street, but the mechanics of how you fix one versus the other are completely different. So, you know, as you drive these trainings, as you drive these new ideas, kind of what are some of those challenges you find yourself coming into?
I'll jump in. I think, you know, the culture and transitioning the culture and getting people to think differently about things, you know, when folks have been used to doing on premise, when they've been used to doing a lot of manual activities, that there's a lot of comfort in the way that works for folks. And, you know, some of the discussions we had early on as we started to journey down this path is, hey, you know, we're going to change how, you know, how things are operating, and people need to be, you know, comfortable with being uncomfortable. And it's okay to trip and fall and stumble and fail, but we want to do it in a manner where that's never catastrophic, right? And so how do you sort of learn and build and mature in this without ever getting in a situation where you got a, you know, a huge problem?
Yeah.
So that's a key item, David.
And Melissa, I think this is one of the areas I definitely want to kind of question a little bit on PTO, because they had a unique and an interesting approach to how they tried to get their whole team on board, right? And so I don't know if you want to share some of the experiences you guys had on your end, Melissa, and some of the thoughts there.
Sure. So to kind of go to your first question, what Jerry's saying, I think, you know, the pace of change is only as fast as how you can unlearn the old stuff. So it's about unlearning and then learning the new skills. And I think in transformation, it is all about the acquisition of the new skills and in the new way of doing things. So the USPTO, when we first started in on our new ways of working, we stood up the USPTO dojo. And our dojo is all about immersive learning and trying to accelerate the digital transformation. So we did bring in teams into the dojo in an immersive experience, having, you know, the coaches and technical experts, knowledge experts surrounding the team to help them learn new skills, new ways of doing things on their own work. So they would bring their own work, their own stuff in and do and practice that skill in a new way. And I think leveraging that model really did help us accelerate the change.
And I guess one of the interesting elements, because I've always thought that process from USPTO was something, so like, I mean, very innovative, great idea or right concept for how do we help kind of drive change organization wide. But one, you know, I think USPTO was in a unique position to execute and make that one happen. And I think, you know, different agencies, as they try to implement similar models, run into different sets of challenges. So, I mean, you know, it's kind of interesting to see how these approaches work and how they're modified for different groups. So like, I know Casey, in your situation, right, USDA operates a little bit differently. So I don't know if you have any comments on kind of that approach and how you guys have drawn ideas from it and, you know, where you're emulating or where you had to shift that strategy.
Yeah, we're definitely not yet implementing or doing a like a dojo style, but I know we've been on discussions with what they're doing at USPTO for that specific use case and how we can start adopting those kinds of ideas. I know from a USDA perspective, one of the challenges we see with this kind of shift towards a DevSecOps culture is that digital product ownership on an agile fashion means that the product owner actually owns the backlog. We historically don't have business owners in a lot of projects that understand IT is not a cost center. It's how they deliver digital services to the customer, to the end user public. And that's different than it had been. I manage a program that's separate, right? Like, and now it's very much, they have to be highly involved because that's how services are delivered. And that digital product ownership is really one of the key things that we're struggling with organizationally. And I think using things like a PTO processes with the dojo and things of that nature really help us move forward and gain that understanding and clearly articulate kind of the how we do it in a safe and like structured learning mechanism, as opposed to trial by fire, which is often how we see it executed today. Because usually it's we're under the gun. We're already behind schedule before we even start. And that just is indicative of probably most government agencies anymore, it feels.
No, and it definitely happens. Actually, here, I'll take a minute to show another fun one. We could rewrite this one a little bit to say, you know, whatever our legacy COBOL systems are, but it's kind of like, this is sort of the situation that many of us find ourselves in within these agencies. You know, and it's a lot of work to have to undo and rebuild and kind of modernize these systems that are so giant in their scale, but you know, and built for a very different time and a very different structure and organization, you know, and needs than what they are designed to fulfill, what they need to fulfill today. And so, you know, that's part of that challenge. And then ultimately it's a matter of, you know, there's, I think, a couple of the things that we covered within the white paper and we wanted to call attention to. And honestly, we did our best job to address, but we were trying to avoid writing a book. So kept it to as many pages as we could. But it really was, you know, addressing these issues. When we look at these impediments, there's so many levels to them, and it's easy to connect them together too. There's the cultural level, there's the organizational level, right? We got Conway's Law coming into effect very much so when we're attacking these problems, which is, you know, a lot of the development reflects the bureaucracy of how the organization was built. But that bureaucracy no longer makes sense for delivering value in a digital world, which is why, you know, you have organizations like PTO who's shifted to try to reorganize across a product-oriented model. So, you know, you have those kind of leadership challenges. There's contractual issues around how money is allocated. You know, if funding, and you know, you're not wrong, Casey. You have USDA trying to operate. You know, it exists as a cost center. That's the way the money funds and drives itself. And so, when you're trying to move forward and you're trying to make that shift, you know, it's not a very, very easy thing to just reallocate and drive it together, you know, kind of change the way that money is being managed. So there is a lot of different challenges. I think it's kind of a matter of trying to bring those different groups together and drive that up and put, you know, kind of get more aligned along the process. And so I know Jerry, and psychological safety is a big one too. Yeah, for sure. You know, how do we make people feel comfortable and confident that it's okay not knowing the answer to something and nobody's going to get in trouble, because none of us know the answer yet. And you know, when you exist in an environment, and we've always operated under the mindset of government can't mess up, because, well, realistically, government can't. So, you know, where does the fail fast come in? Where does the understanding of, you know, failing forward come through? And learning, you know, how to, you know, minimize the risks so that the failures are tiny enough to mitigate and use as learning experiences to improve over time, so that we're not stuck with these ginormous projects. So, you know, Casey, Jerry, I don't know, I know you guys have both been part of a working group where you're kind of discussing this. You're at two very different levels of an organization. So interested in seeing kind of how that plays into your organizations.
So, David, you know, first and foremost, I think the staff has to feel comfortable with that leadership is going to support them, right? And that leadership, when they make statements about, hey, we're going to do things and we're going to try things and it's okay, right? there has to be, a genuineness to that, and staff need to feel comfortable that leadership has their back on these types of things. And so I think that is absolutely a key aspect to this. And then, to the point of many of these projects, the way you do them is you carve off small incremental pieces, such that if there's an issue, there's an issue to, I think you use sort of that micro failures, right? That when somebody stumbles on something, it doesn't mean that the business program fails, right? This little small piece, there's an issue with that, and then you come up with a plan to resolve that, and you get the project back on, or the program back on track, and you move it forward, and you get the product delivered, right? And so those are the key ways. It's like, how do you get, but it's back to getting that mindset of having a product, really focusing on that incremental delivery where you can carve off those small pieces such that they're not trying to solve everything at once.
Dave, I think you're on mute.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, everybody. Interesting enough, I was on another call last week where we were discussing the geriatricness of my inability to unmute sometimes. So sorry, Casey, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else to that.
Yeah, I do want to clarity on this. So we referenced a cloud working group at USDA. That is a USDA wide cloud working group that Jerry and I are both a part of, and we have 80 plus folks attending synchronously and asynchronously biweekly. Jerry's been key in helping it, and that's really how we're changing our culture at the USDA, because we do have common goals, and we're working through that to help us cut down on some of the challenges. There's notes on this, like what are challenges? It's basically anything that causes risk to the delivery, right? And I agree wholeheartedly with what Jerry said. When you're doing Agile, it's supposed to be the smallest deliverable increment. So failure on a smallest increment is not very risky. That's not very risky to the program, right? We're talking hours, minutes, days kind of impact, not weeks, months, years, because it's not a big bang project where everything shifted weeks or months. And really having that, and then having your folks' back, that like, that's not a bad thing, because we learned and we move forward. And that learning and that mind growth mindset is key. If you keep making the same mistake over and over, that's kind of probably a problem, right? But if you made it, move forward, and that's now part of the process, that's success. And delivering that helps enable it.
Well, and I think, when you speak holistically to a lot of these discussions, right, I think a lot of people will agree. I think the challenge becomes, how do you integrate that kind of a behavior and those kinds of incentives into an organization to drive people to want to incorporate those elements. So, Melissa, I know in your organization, again, the dojos were kind of a good piece of this. Give me some more context.
I'll pivot a little bit away from the dojo. I think the dojos absolutely created a safe space for learning. Again, where they're, working on their own stuff with, a smaller group and able to learn fast. I kind of like the learn fast versus fail fast, kind of going off of what Casey said. I also have found, all of this takes time, right? You're shifting, we're shifting an entire IT program's culture and way of thinking. And I think there's all sorts of different techniques, throughout the journey that you can start to incorporate. So, we've actually been facilitating a lot more retrospectives, at all different levels, not just with the product teams, but like any other efforts that go on, even with our executives. We've hosted retrospectives, and it's all about, okay, so we've got all of this great feedback. Now, what are we going to do to improve? And like focusing on the learning of that, driving that culture of transparency at all levels, right? And we have quarterly reviews, and I've noticed that just continuously trying and improving and bringing up difficult conversations, or having, you know, more fierce conversations along the way, driving that transparency creates that psychological safety, and creating that culture of learning where it's okay to you know, not get everything right the first time and continue to build on that. You know, we've introduced objectives and key results, and they're really at the strategic level, and so they do require a lot of collaboration and communication across all of our product lines with our executive boards, our product line leads, which come from the business, and then the IT side of the shop. And so that's just an example of, I think, an area where we've introduced something and it's helped create, you know, more critical conversations, helped build that transparency, and therefore creates a culture of being able to talk about things, being able to learn fast and pivot or try something new. You know, there's always room for improvement. So.
Yeah. And so one thing I want to start doing, so I want to start shifting a little bit of the conversation. We've got about 15 minutes left. There's 2 topic areas I want to cover, but I think one of the big ones on this topic area is the collaboration with other groups, right? So right now, everybody here, we're all, you know, all of you are situated within your OCIO organizations. There's also the business, there's also procurement, there's also industry, right? And industry, which fuels a significant portion of that staff and that group that we have to educate as well. And so, you know, I guess one of those things becomes, how do you get all of these different groups on the same page? Because the success of a DevOps integration is very heavily reliant, not just on, you know, pitching great ideas and you know, upskilling our internal federal organization, but also working very closely with these other groups. And what I've come to see a lot of times is a situation that looks a little bit more like this, which is, you know, everybody kind of finding a reason to explain why the other group can't kind of deliver, or where it's coming, what's going wrong, and where we're missing, right? So funny interpretation of it, but the idea here is like, it's really, there's no like weak link. I think it's a matter of how do we communicate effectively across all these groups and come together. So I wanted to see if any of you guys wanted to contribute to that piece.
I can jump in. So first I'll start with, you know, anything can be improved, and I'm sure we have USPTO has room to grow here. That said, I will say that, you know, in the very beginning of this transformation, we did bring in procurement. So there was, you know, we had a procurement work stream of, you know, how do we improve that area to better facilitate our product model, and agile teams, and you know, restructuring. So procurement's been on this journey with us, which has been immensely helpful. We also worked with procurement and our transformation to do a reverse industry days. So we actually brought in our vendor partners, Office of Procurement, change leaders, you know, kind of across, and talked about what we wanted to see, right? The changes that we wanted to see in culture, the changes we wanted to see in how we were engaging with both our Office of Procurement and with our vendors. You know, we want to have innovators and collaborators versus just, you know, order takers. And so I think, you know, kind of hosting these broader events help set the right tone for how we proceed with our contractors and our contracts and engagements there. You know, internally, we've also done, we actually had a procurement dojo. Like, we knew we had a process that was not working well for us. And so we brought that challenge into the dojo, pulled in the right people across the organization, pulling in a contract specialist with the team, and really tried to drive some learnings from that and process improvement. And we continue to think about creative ideas. You know, we have Office of Procurement in some of our quarterly reviews and engaging with our product owners and our lead product owners. You know, and again, as part of this product transformation, it's about, you know, empowering the people closest to the work. And so getting more engagement from the business with, you know, their IT counterpart, with the contract folks, you know, I think is driving better collaboration there and helping break down some of those silos.
So it sounds like some of these takeaways, you know, bring in industry, try to learn from them, get their take on things, upskill procurement, as well as, you know, not just upskilling our IT talent, but, you know, getting procurement up to speed on what these new businesses look like. And then also, how do we integrate and drive these conversations within the business as well, so that all parties are kind of upskilling at the same rate. Casey, I know in your realm, you were just speaking to this, you know, towards the beginning of the conversation, right? USDA HQ, you're a fee center. Then we have to, which means that your end customers are all the individual agencies. Those agencies have an end customer of the citizen in many different ways, or sometimes organizations, other, you know, businesses and farms and et cetera. So what's this conversation look like to you? How does it differ for you guys?
Yeah, I won't lie, I keep taking notes, Melissa. I love the reverse industry and procurement dojo idea. We're tackling similar concepts and issues for the department for USDA. I can't go into details. Everybody knows that fun game. But we're looking to do that same idea so we can have agile capabilities that meet the demands we have and understand those kinds of goals. And then there was some notes in there, and I think it was in the chat. Wade Wassenberger talked about the architecture and design has to be there. That's the real idea there, is like, how do we figure out how these plumbing of these things and what do we want out of them and make them optimized to work the way we need it to, and then continuously improve them. I know that was a discussion point that we've heard. That there's not an end state with DevSecOps and most of this work. It's a continual change and growth. We're going to have it. It's going to be good. It's going to be efficient, but there's always room to improve, and using procurement and all those things and understanding. I really appreciate Melissa's notes there about really that concept of procurement is part of our IT delivery pipeline. There is almost always some aspect there. I deal a lot with cloud, things of that nature. There's always stuff there. And that's one of the great things, is hearing partners in industry and using ACT-IAC and other groups to help bring in those kinds of discussions and help us learn, as well as asking how we're trying to, like, what are our gaps? What are we trying to do? And then provide market research and information back to us. I did see someone I think it was Abel Casellas asked, how do we reward those small? With more work. That's how you reward good work. It's with more work, of course. No, I'm kidding. That's a joke. Don't take that seriously.
Technically, more billable hours for the vendors. I think that's a heck of a reward. I'm just going to say that up front.
David said that, not Casey.
Sorry, but hey, you know, one more thing I want to mention about this, Jerry or Casey, you guys can answer this one, but Kevin actually from FPAC, he did mention another interesting comment where he said, you know, about the acquisition process as well, like, how are we asking questions about integration and interoperability, and just in general, like, are we asking the right questions in acquisitions? We're getting close. We got 9 minutes left, and I want to shift to one more topic. So hopefully we can keep this answer short. But if you guys have like a 30-second spiel, would love to get your thoughts on that, since we're on this topic.
You know, API first approaches in cloud and DevSecOps are a critical part, you know, of breaking that sort of monolith down into consumable pieces. I don't know how we've, you know, whether we've integrated that into procurement side of things or not, but it's definitely something that from a design and architecture that we're definitely paying attention to as we move forward. Particularly in cloud environments where things change so rapidly, you've got to be able to be agile and adapt constantly. So
appreciate that one. And so one thing I want to drive towards, before we move towards kind of what we want to call our future state, and Casey, I love that you were already kind of driving in that direction. A good question that Shunlei brought to the table, and it is a good, and she asked about security and how are we implementing it. I want to expand that question just a little more and just say, remember towards the beginning of the conversation, I was joking around, there's an everything ops, right? And so, as we move forward, right, DevOps was meant to be one all-encompassing term, but realistically, because the idea is here is the philosophy about how do we engage and drive value delivery better. But it started within development with operations. And so as we've expanded that to try to, we realize our organizations are becoming more matrixed, our value delivery is becoming more horizontal, and our need to integrate that way across organizations is important. So how are we integrating these different elements? Let's focus on security primarily, because I think it's a big one for a lot of people on this call, but feel free to bring in, Jerry, I know data has been a big one for you recently. So, feel free to kind of tie down to some of these, other elements, because if we want to speak to like the ML ops or the data ops, et cetera, I know there's other folks here that feed into those realms. So I'm sure they would love to hear it too.
Yeah, so I'll touch on the sort of the data or ML scientific, data science ops. And so within our organization, we have several different groups that are doing a lot with machine learning and generating data sets and those sorts of things. And so just as we're supporting developers, we're now sort of pivoting and really working with our CDO's office and start to move down how do we automate data ops? How do we integrate that in with machine learning so that these data scientists, soil scientists can really focus on the business that they're trying to deliver and less on the IT side of things? Because that's, there's a lot of amazing work that's going on, but today a lot of those folks end up having to sort of have a dual hat where they're doing IT work because that's what they need to do to get their pieces in place. And that's definitely an area that we're focusing on. How do we streamline that to allow those folks to, just like we allow the devs to focus on the delivery, get that infrastructure out of the way? How do we do the same thing for those scientific folks?
And then, Casey, how about in terms of, the security elements, how do we make sure we're not forgetting any of those in the process?
So security is an interesting one, and I think it lays into the continuous ATO question. When you go through these, like as Jerry illustrated in the diagram and how it mapped out, it's understanding those inputs, and then those payloads of your pipeline are getting an API response that conforms to response for your regulatory requirements. You know what's happening, and you're getting that documented through your API integration, and those capabilities. I'm trying to remember the term that Jerry's team uses, but it's much more of a compliance by default mentality, because you're following your pipeline. You're saying this is the process and this is how we're delivering. And that's how your continuous ATO process is updated. And that's how security is also integrated. It's part of the design and considerations at the front end. The shift left is it like way overused, but that's the idea, is it's built with those in mind, as opposed to an afterthought, a reactionary process at the back end.
And I think one of the fun ways to describe it, I have one more fun set of memes here. We have sort of trying to avoid a situation like this, which is, some of these work fine in dev, and now it's, it's ops problem now. And this is another fun one I feel like we've been hearing lately, right? Like before DevOps, after DevOps, and you can incorporate the technical elements of DevOps, right? But if you haven't changed people's minds to a new philosophy, you're kind of getting, you're kind of still in the same boat having those kind of conversations. And so, I think that covers a bit of it. I appreciate kind of where we're going. So I just want to wrap up with one last piece. And it's really around the concept of, what's the future show mean, right? Like what exactly is it? Because DevOps is really, not something that it's supposed to have an end state. It's a matter of continuous improvement. So as you move forward and, we advance through levels of maturity, what are we looking forward to as what is the desired goal of what we're trying to achieve and build towards? And I think one of the most interesting references I saw recently for anybody who's a gamer was they were saying, it's sort of like an MMORPG. It never ends. So then they showed like a picture of World of Warcraft or whatever, it just goes on forever and ever, and they keep adding to it. So I don't know, what's your vision on that? And hopefully we can close out with some of those thoughts.
I'll go. I think I'm the only one off mute, so I'll take the opportunity. So, looking into FY24, at least for our transformation kind of roadmap items, I'm looking at product maturity and getting more focused in on how we use data to drive some of our prioritization and value, automated governance. So not necessarily specific to CATO, but really automated governance and building that into our continuous delivery, and then measuring our transformation. So how do we kind of define the target state, measure what matters, and then use that to drive our next steps?
Terry, you want to say anything there?
Yeah, I love that list of items. I think there's a lot of overlap from what FPAC. We are just really starting off on our project to product journey. So again, we have products defined, but really getting business to understand that holistic view, really start making, metric-based decisions on things is really kind of where we're at from that perspective. And so I think that's a big thing. I think also automating our change control and more of those things so that we continue to work through eliminating manual toil. And then, the big thing for us is really starting to, we've got a very large development organization. And so really starting to, get those concepts permeated throughout the entire development organization. To really start accelerating these devs. We definitely have early adopters. We have folks that are excited and driving, but there's that sort of getting that to permeate through a large organization just takes time. And so that's going to be a big thing we're going to be working on through the next year and a half.
Yeah. Greatly appreciate that. Casey, if you really do want to jump in, I'll let you jump in as well. But as you do, I want to just give everybody call one last bit of attention as we're wrapping up to the DevOps white paper we put together. A lot of good topic areas here around some of the different challenges, and more specifically, since this conversation really was meditated by this specific document, the one thing I wanted to make sure we did was give special thanks to those that contributed to this paper. So there are a number of individuals that helped write, a number of individuals that also helped review. A lot of thanks and appreciation towards those individuals. I want to say thank you very much. And again, we do have an ongoing DevOps working group. We're working on kind of trying to drive what that next step is going to look like for us as well. And as a part of that, Jerry's discussions around data and kind of where does MLOps start to fit in is an area that we are very interested in kind of exploring in the coming months as we drive the group forward. So to those who are interested in kind of getting involved with the group, getting more acclimated, please feel free to email myself, Jerry, or Nancy. Actually, Nancy's usually the easiest one because she can get you into the entire, distribution list, and we'll be happy to take that in. So, Casey, I know I let Jerry and Melissa jump in. Wanted to make sure, you had any other last words as well for this group, and kind of, what's your ideal, philosophical state of DevOps, right? Because we don't want to call it the end. There is no end, but what's that mature stage you're trying to achieve of improvement?
Really, from our perspective, it's getting that data elements and those things to help drive innovation, and the things that Jerry and Melissa both talked about is because like my job at the enterprise is to get some of that visible so they can help drive optimization and decisions for their work. And that's really what we're focused on in the next year, as well as leveraging the cloud working group at USDA to help understand some of these and continuously improve and address. And someone put in the chat, there was questions around AI and ML. Those are places we're going to go. That's coming. We're just maybe not as ready as we want to be today to start leveraging it yet.
Exactly. And I mean, I know there's some great folks on this call from your own organization that were definitely a part of that. So it is an area obviously of focus and interest for USDA as well as for many other agencies. I think we're going to kind of be driving towards that. So ultimately, that's our hope as an ACT-IAC working group, right? We're trying to collaborate, bring together good minds from both industry, from government, and random troublemakers like myself that really just exist to get people to talk, because I'm not a great mind on either side, but just hopefully to end us, to help us move towards a better state. So thank you so much to all of you that contributed. Thank you to those who contributed on the paper as well. Very special thanks, because I know that we don't have the time to name them all out, but they were big contributors and provided a lot of help. And thanks to ACT-IAC for just bringing us all together. So with that, have a wonderful Tuesday, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.